Hello and welcome to Big Picture. I am Vishal Dahiya and today we will talk about the general elections 2019 and the issue of national security. In the ongoing electoral battle, national security has come out as a major poll issue. Both national parties have given ample space in their respective manifestos to the issues related to national security, while the ruling party BJP is trying to attract the voters by highlighting its track record on tackling internal and external threats. The main opposition, Congress, has also recently released its vision document on national security. So what are the various dimensions of national security and how much of it is being covered by these political parties and their leaders in their manifesto, vision documents and the campaign speeches? For more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of guests today. Let me start by introducing them to you, beginning with the retired Major General Ravi Arora, the Chief Editor of Indian Military Review. And we have with us Ms. Aditi Phadnis, the Political Editor of Business Standard, and also Major General Dhruv Katoch, the Director of India Foundation. Welcome all of you to Rajya Sabha TV studios. Let me begin with you, General Arora, to try and understand from, for our viewers' benefit. When we talk about national security, what are the various dimensions which we are looking at, various aspects of national security when we talk about issues related to this?
I think it's very important to understand this aspect before you go any further in the debate. Everybody is agreed, whether any political party or any luminaries or experts, that national security has two aspects. One is the external aspect and one is the internal dimension. By external, of course, it means the territorial integrity of the country being defended against war or external aggression. And here it includes dimensions of foreign policy and our relations with other nations. And the internal dimension, which includes a whole lot of issues, aspects which can be made insecure or are not secure within the country. And this includes energy. We often talk of energy security. It includes food, it includes water security, it includes cyber security, police reforms, law and order, and whole lot of things.
Okay.
So when we talk of national security, we must also discuss all these dimensions. Since the issue at hand we are discussing is about national security during polls, the people have a right to know about all these issues from every political party in the fray. As to what their policy is, what they are going to do about it.
Okay.
And at the same time, the political parties are also within their rights to put across to people what plans they have, what they have included in the manifesto. But the problem is that some of the parties are talking only about limited aspects of national security.
Well, we'll come to that feature as well as to what is being talked about and from what perspective. But General Katoch, what General Arora said more or less sums up the kind of issues which one should look at. Anything you would like to add on to these aspects of national security here?
No, I think these aspects have been well covered. But very frankly, when we talk of national security, I think we have to restrict it to certain fundamental issues. You see, we have to restrict it to safeguarding the country. And it is all very well to talk about energy and water and food. You see, anything is security. But when we are really talking about it, the nuts and bolts of it is how to keep the nation secure so that all other functions of the government can take place within that ambit.
Okay.
That means what we are really looking at is a secure environment, right? A secure environment without tension, without conflict. And in that secure environment, the space is given to the citizens of India to carry on and progress with their life the way they ought to.
Okay.
So I would really, while every aspect which General Arora has said is correct, I think for the purpose of any discussion on national security, we must restrict it to certain fundamental aspects. Otherwise, each aspect is an issue in itself. Like energy by itself is a complete issue. Water is a complete issue. Climate is a complete issue and all are important.
Okay.
But without that overriding space which is required by the citizen by which he can actually function. Like if you want to do something on energy, then you require an environment by which you can do something about it.
So basically what you're saying is dealing with internal and external threats is basically what the crux is.
So let us deal with keeping a secure environment to enable the citizens of India, the government and its institutions to function the way they should.
Okay, a secure environment. So let's bring in our political expert of the day, Ms. Aditi Phadnis here. Ms. Phadnis, you heard both the gentlemen, and both of them have been career guys in armed forces. So looking at what exactly is the definition or what are the aspects of national security, and looking at what both national parties have offered in their manifestos or their vision document, or we hear their leaders speaking day after day talking about several aspects of the national security. What's your point of view in terms of what these both parties are saying right now?
Well, both parties are coming out and asserting that they will take care of national security as and when problems arise, and they will defend the borders and address problems of internal security, etc. But there are very varying and very startling differences on the finer points. For instance, the way the Congress looks at it, the doing away of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act in certain areas where it is imposed, which it has been in place for many years now. That is the security for the ordinary people, which translates into national security. If you do away with it, their argument is that people will not rise up against you, their civil rights will be protected, and the Armed Forces Special Powers Act has outlived its utility. I'm sure the two gentlemen with me will have very strong views on this, but that's a separate issue.
Okay.
At the same time, the Bharatiya Janata Party is saying that they are the ones who have defended the borders most ferociously and most strongly, witnessing the recent airstrikes and other things. But they also need to explain why, when the armed forces deposed before the Parliamentary Standing Committee and pointed out huge deficiencies in preparedness, the chairman of the Standing Committee, who happened to be a BJP MP, General B.C. Khanduri, was sacked from the chairmanship of the Standing Committee. Sacked. He was humiliated and he was sacked. So there are, and also the spending on in the defense budget has been progressively declining, and if you take an average, is probably the lowest in the last 10 years.
Okay.
Maybe longer.
Okay.
Many say the lowest since 1962.
Okay.
So there are questions, of course, and our job is to ask the questions.
Okay. So what you're saying is, Ms. Phadnis, what you're pointing out is it's about the larger picture as well. It's not only about, the numbers of tackling internal security, external security. It's about larger numbers as well. Let's bring in General Arora. In terms of larger numbers, what Aditi is pointing out is in terms of providing resources to the armed forces, in terms of more allocation in defense budget, giving them more resources. But if I look at the manifestos, both the manifestos are talking about, while the BJP's manifesto says that they will focus on self-reliance in defense sector, some sort of similar thing is being talked about by the Congress manifesto, although in different words. So both seemingly are saying the same thing, but the focus, according to you, is, as Aditi pointing out, has to be on the larger picture.
Absolutely right. Well, I would say both the UPA and the NDA governments have been responsible for giving less and less to the armed forces for modernization. But at the same time, I would like to compare the record of both these governments. Of course, the UPA's record over longer term and the NDA's record of providing for modernization or the wherewithal to the armed forces for meeting external threats. And in that, I would say some of the schemes or projects or deals were initiated by the UPA government but fructified during NDA rule. But the fact remains that a large amount of money was spent and hardware provided to the armed forces during the last 5 years. Whether it was C-17 planes or C-130 or Boeing P-8I surveillance planes or guns or helicopters. So much of it has come during this time. And on this big issue of the Rafale multi-role aircraft, we know that during UPA's tenure, they were not able to finalize the deal, and it was done during the NDA government, however much controversial it may have been. So I would say both governments are responsible for the decrease in the defense budget for the armed forces over the years.
Okay.
And this is a very sore point.
Okay.
I would agree that it requires much more improvement. It has gone to unacceptable standards, and it has manifested itself in the Air Force today having 30 squadrons where it should have 42, the Navy not having enough submarines, the Army not having enough guns today, although the induction has started, the Navy again not having minesweepers at all. But again, when you come back to it, during the NDA's rule, our space capabilities have increased, our nuclear capabilities have increased, the triad is in place, the strategic communications are in place, and so on.
So the focus, what you're saying, is has to be on the overall picture, the larger picture, and providing more to the armed forces. General Katoch, from this aspect, this is quite important when we say that there are two kinds of threats from the national security's perspective: internal threats and external threat. To deal with external threats, you will have to have your armed forces equipped properly. You have to have more resources to be spent on the armed forces. So in that aspect, what General Arora is pointing out holds a lot more value here.
Yes, you see, it is, I think as far as the armed forces are concerned, there has always been this feeling that the resources which were required, perhaps they have not been given to the amount which was required. However, it was also a truism that the amount of budget which was given has never been fully spent. Now, it is very difficult really to say that how has this contradiction risen. And I think one of the problems which we face is, I mean, leave aside how much money has been given. I think, when Aditi Phadnis ji, when she spoke of the budget, she's speaking in terms of percentage of GDP, not in actual numbers. In actual numbers, the budget has been rising every year. In terms of GDP, it is going down. So when your GDP doubles, right, obviously the amount of money which you're getting in defense, even if it is at a lower percentage, actually goes up.
Okay.
I mean, but you see, budget I really don't think is the issue. I think we have to look at things which are beyond the issue, and these are management issues. And here I think we have gone very, very dramatically wrong. If you look at what has happened in India, and I think the root cause, if you have to look at it, that when you're looking at the planning process, where does the problem lie?
And you're talking about the policy framework.
It is the policy framework, you see. And this policy framework is made by the Ministry of Defense. And I think that is the one institution where reforms are required first. If you do not reform the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Defense Finance, it doesn't matter what you do beneath it, nothing will work, because ultimately that is the fountainhead. We have come into a very an odd situation, may I put it this way, that the service chiefs are accountable for their respective services, but they do not have the powers, right? On the other hand, when you have the Ministry of Defense, which is entirely manned by the civilian bureaucracy, there is no accountability, but all financial and administrative powers rest with them.
Okay.
Now, I think this is an anomaly which has to be corrected.
Okay.
I have also spoken earlier on this, that if you look at the United States or Europe or the other, or Britain or France, look at their Ministry of Defense. About half of the ministry is composed of officers which belong to the armed forces. If you look at China, it is a much higher percentage. Pakistan, it is practically 100%. India perhaps is the only country in the world which is a democracy which has not one military officer in the Ministry of Defense.
Okay.
Now, I think when you are looking at giving advice to the government, to the Raksha Mantri, now this advice has to be given by the service chiefs. Now, I do not think you are in a position to render any worthwhile advice when you have to go through a bureaucratic maze. And it has been the biggest, let me put it this way, the problems which the Indian armed forces face is entirely with India's bureaucracy and not with the political establishment.
Okay.
This is one thing which I feel needs reforms.
Okay. Let me bring in Aditi here. Aditi, these are the issues which, do you see, in the present discourse, the electoral discourse which is happening, do you see these things being talked about by the representatives of the political party, these aspects of the national security, when we talk about the overall policy framework, making changes there, or decentralization of power, or, giving more financial powers to the service chiefs, or the reforms in the defense ministry, as General Katoch is pointing out?
You know, somebody said that war is too important a matter to be left to the generals. In the same way, I think reviewing the working of the defense services and the armed forces and their relationship between the two is too important a matter to be discussed in as part of, you know, an election discourse in public meetings and in pan shops and bazaar gossip and stuff like that. It's probably just as well that it has not become the subject of a mainstream political debate. And this is a matter to be left to the experts who know about these areas and not a subject to be discussed as some part of, you know, election campaigning speeches.
But these are the reform processes which are the need of the day.
I think we need to have a bipartisan approach to defense reform, and there are many tiers of defense reform that are required. Funding is the last part of it. As India progresses, its defense challenges will become more complex, and we need to have a single point of advice, which is in the Chief of Defence Staff, which neither party has yet appointed, although both are pledged to appointing one. You need to have a person who will understand the priorities of the defence services, the spending priorities, as well as the relationship between the capital and the revenue expenditure. You need to have people who will spend their entire lifetime addressing these issues. And I think it's much more complicated than merely a matter of you know, how much the GDP goes up and how much it comes down and how much the defense expenditure goes up and comes down.
Okay, so more in-depth analysis is required. General, let's now move on to the other aspect of national security.
I want to comment on this.
But I understand we can go ahead and talk, you know, keep on talking about these reforms as well. But the other aspect, important aspect, is the internal security aspects, and that also is a very important part of the national security. Now, when we look at you know, both the manifestos or vision documents, whatever these parties would wish to call these documents, but they do talk about a lot on what they plan to do or what they have achieved so far in terms of internal security. And one aspect of that is AFSPA, the issue which was mentioned by Ms. Phadnis also here. So how do you look at these issues being talked about and being addressed?
It's very interesting, especially in view of what Aditi has said. AFSPA is a very small part, and it's a functional part. It's a, you know, of how operations are carried out. Internal security, as you mentioned, includes left-wing extremism, insurgency, whether in J&K, Northeast, or all over the country. You know, Maoist insurgency. It also includes internal security. Also includes issues like fake currency, illegal migration. So many issues. AFSPA is just a tool to empower the armed forces to go and operate in these areas. Now, you know, when the union's forces have been used all over the country for such a long time, that is the real issue, not AFSPA. You should address the problem to reduce the causes and hence reduce the deployment of the union's forces all over the country. You know, get peace in those areas, resolve issues, rather than fighting over whether AFSPA should be diluted or removed or continued. Of course, AFSPA is required wherever counterinsurgency operations are in place. That most people agree, and it's only a, you know, election emotive issue to sway the people and get their votes. So I don't think that, of course, the Congress has put it in their manifesto that they will revoke AFSPA. They have also said they will crack down on hate crimes. They will also scrap the sedition law and such other things.
Okay.
But on the other hand, the BJP in their manifesto, when it comes to internal security, has talked about Section 35A, Section 370 as it applies to J&K. They have talked of illegal migration, that means the Citizenship Amendment Act and such other things.
Okay.
So AFSPA is a very small thing. I wish, one more thing, the Congress has released or made public the National Security Strategy. Sorry?
The vision document.
Yeah, the vision document. yesterday, and they said they had already incorporated some of the issues which the author, General Hooda, has mentioned in the National Security Strategy Vision document in their manifesto.
Okay.
But the whole thing has not been included, and I wish this national security strategy, not only strategy, the policy and then the strategy, had been formulated by the government when it was in power.
Okay.
Till today, our country does not have a national security policy nor a comprehensive national security strategy. The armed forces themselves have gone ahead and on their own made a joint military doctrine and a joint air force, an air force doctrine and maritime doctrine and a land warfare doctrine.
So basically a lot more work is needed there as well. But everything comes back to, ensuring a secure environment for the citizens of the country.
Yes.
Something which you started with, General Katoch.
You see, that is the fundamental thing, because, I mean, what are people looking for? People are looking for to get on with their lives, their agriculture, their industrial production, their business, all those things. And that can only take place in a secure environment. Now, that secure environment, I think, is the key. When we're looking at national security, simply give that environment and let the people carry on. Now, I think these are the issues which actually need to be debated as to why do we not have a secure environment in the Northeast since the 50s? Why? Why do we not have a secure environment in Kashmir for the last 3 decades? Why do we still have left-wing extremism going on in various districts of India since the late 60s, 1967 onwards? Now, those are the questions, you see, and very rightly said by the General Ravi Arora, that it's got nothing to do with ASPA. ASPA was simply a remedy because the Constitution has no provisions for the employment of the armed forces. So, if you want the armed forces to operate, then they require constitutional a constitutional sanction which comes in through ASPA. That's about it. But fundamentally, I think one of the reasons why nothing gets done is because they are not debated. That is where I disagree with Aditi ji for this one reason. You see, these are all nice cliches, peace, war is too important to be left to the generals. Obviously, peace is too important to be left to the politicians. We can carry on these cliches. Cliches don't work. You have to debate these issues. They must come into the public consciousness. I'll just give you one example. Leave aside this, what we were just talking about. Let us take the fact that why does India till date, why are we still not self-sufficient in defense production? Now, we have got 41 ordnance factories. I think it is 43, but 2 are still coming up to standard, 43. We have got 9 defense public sector undertakings. We have got a mammoth research organization, and the combined staff is 400,000 people. No other country in the world has a staff of this nature. No other country in the world has such budgets. And yet we import 70% of our defense goods. Okay. Now, we have never had a debate on the functioning of the defense public sector. We have never had a debate on the functioning of the Ministry of Defense till date. What are those people doing? Why are we in this critical state?
Okay.
Now, those are the issues which I think must be debated, and in my view, they must be debated in the media houses. The 9 o'clock debate by all the TV anchors. But one of the reasons why they're not debated is because people don't have a clue.
Well, General Katoch, there's one thing, yes, you're right about this being debated in the television channels and others as well. I'm pretty sure people would watch, Rajya Sabha TV and find out that, these are the issues which we have discussed in debate and debated threadbare as well. But for the final concluding comments, since we're running out of time, let me bring in Aditi here. Aditi, the way both the gentlemen are describing, there seems to be several aspects to national security. It's a vast subject, internal security, external security. Then you talk about defense preparedness. Then General Katoch talked about how we have to be self-reliant as well. So there are layers and layers and layers. But in this election, we see national security coming up as a very big important issue. So that seems to be a positive, step ahead. At least people are talking about it.
Well, people are talking about it, but I'm not sure if people are talking about it in the spirit that it should be talked about. Rather than preening about what you've done, I think it's more important to understand what you haven't been able to do.
Okay.
And unfortunately, that part of it, which, as I mentioned earlier, General Khanduri lost his job because of that. That part of it is simply not being discussed enough.
Okay. So there are, as our panelists are pointing out, several aspects, several layers to the issue of national security, and with both the national parties taking it up as an important poll issue, trying to attract voters. Let's wait and watch as to whether or not the voter agrees to either of them, and after the results are announced, whosoever wins this election, whether or not, or in what terms, in what form, will they be able to fulfill their promises and make right of those promises which have been made in their manifestos and vision documents. We'll come back again tomorrow with a different topic and different set of guests. Till then, keep watching Rajaspa Television.